Do not adjust your digital device. What you are about to see and hear may shock and appall you. Join our hosts as they encounter countless thrills, spills, chills, and hilarity as they explore the very weirdest in pop culture. The following media is so strange, so beyond the scope of what is normal, it will make you ask the question, why does this exist?
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Why Does This Exist? I'm Chris.
And I'm Rob.
And today we have returned. We're going to be talking about some really cool video game stuff for you, specifically a person of interest in the video game slash YouTuber community, which you've probably figured out already. Or you just looked at the title, which...
Well, yeah, if you looked at the title of the friggin'
cheated.
podcast episode, you know.
That's you cheating. But if you're going into this thing blind, then you've probably figured out normal. So we're going to be talking about the Angry Video Game Nerd. His real name is James Rolfe. That's not a dox. He's said it. We know who he is. He seems like a very interesting and cool person. We're going to be talking about him and his work as the Angry Video Game Nerd. And he's kind of, I guess you could say he's one of the last OG YouTubers around. I gotta try to not say influencer because that's not what he is. Although I'm sure he wields quite a bit of influence.
I would say I actually was talking about avgn with a couple of friends the other day, and I was saying like avgn is really the only old school YouTuber that hasn't like been brought down by some kind of controversy or scandal or has been canceled for some reason.
I never thought about that. But
I mean,
yes.
There's a little bit of controversy with him that happened later on in the AVGN series that we could talk about later. But it like the problems were like, it was like stupid compared to like, you know, like other people that are actually like problematic for various reasons.
Yeah, I don't think I know this unless you mean like his
it was just him hiring writers. That was like the biggest controversy with James Rolfe, is the fact that he hired writers to help him with later episodes of AVGN.
Wait, really? That's not that controversial at all.
It's controversy to the fans who are like, he's hiring writers. Clearly he just is he's not good anymore because he hired, you know. That's why we can get into more detail with it later in the episode, because I think it's pretty stupid.
That is very silly, and on top of that, he has a family. I'm sure he just
exactly
needed the extra help.
Yeah,
because you know, when you have a wife and kids, children, family stuff, they take precedent over everything else, and your time gets cut in half. So, why wouldn't you hire someone to help you? Anyway, we will get more into that, but if you're new to the show, we are Why Does This Exist? We talk about weird stuff in pop culture, whether it's a person we're about to do video games, I can't think, movies, music, more. I guess you could say comics. That movies, music, more, comics, all that stuff. Well, that's in the more category. Anyway,
yeah.
If you want to give us money or donate to us or do any other things that support us, all of those things are in the in the description. Feel free to explore those and do what you want.
If you're listening to this, obviously you know where to find us, so we don't have to tell you that, you know, we're available wherever podcasts are sold. But obviously you're listening to this right now, so you know that you've found us.
Yes, and bully for you. So that's the news. Here's the weather. You are now about to witness the true strength of street knowledge from a ragtag group of rogues. So let's get on with the goddamn show. Rob, talk about this man, this soul, this figurehead
of the
retro video game community.
The great James Rolfe. what can you say? AVGN is probably, like we said, one of the original OG video game reviewers on YouTube. He started out, the first AVGN video was, of course, Simon's Quest. Came out way back in 2004. And actually, he had been doing these videos before YouTube was even a thing, because YouTube didn't start until 2006. So his original videos were posted on both Game Trailers and Screw Attack, which were two video game websites back in the day. And I missed that time in video gaming where there was so many different like websites to kind of, see videos, watch trailers, read reviews. It wasn't just like IGN. So
you would also find a lot of different sites for niche content and niche video reviews and all of this. It was a weird, it was a cool, wacky time for a bunch of YouTubers, pre-YouTube, basically.
GameFAQs,
or like just as you, yes, GameFAQs, I believe, still exists.
It does still exist, but I don't think people really use it as much anymore because, if you're stuck in a video game, A, most video games are too easy to be stuck in anymore. And B, if you are stuck in them, you could just look at a YouTube video and see how to get out of where you are. So there's not a lot of use for walkthroughs anymore.
It's which I miss too. I miss going. I miss looking through. I miss going through there and just looking for walkthroughs, and also seeing how
that would write 100-page novel on how to do everything in a video game, and also the entire cover was this amazing ASCII art of just like typed art that was like the logo of the game that you were playing. That was like the best. I always
wondered how long it took people to do that. And also on top of that, you would just go there for cheat codes. I feel like it's still a place where you mostly go for cheat codes for retro games.
Yeah.
But I don't know what else you really go there for. I guess maybe some people are still active on the forums. Like maybe people still use forums. I don't know.
Well, I definitely think it is still a niche market because the retro gaming market is still pretty huge. And so people that are, especially younger people that are collectors that are playing games that they didn't necessarily play when they were growing up because they were either not born yet or too young when they came out. I think there you have GameFAQs as being meeting that niche market there. Because, a lot of that, retro games, you might not necessarily be able to find people playing on YouTube, especially more obscure stuff, which a lot of collectors are playing more obscure games. Especially, like speedrunners and stuff. A lot of times, the more popular games, even if they're old, it's really hard to make a significant dent in the speedrunning community because everybody plays it. So a lot of speedrunners go for those obscure games are not necessarily well known so that they can actually, make somewhat of a dent and actually get their name on the leaderboards. But anyway, I digress. James Rolfe made his debut in 2004 with the Simon's Quest. He later did a review of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, also for the NES, and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles for the NES. And apparently he didn't actually want to upload those original videos. So he made these videos. He was in college at the time. He really just did it for his friends. And it was actually Mike Matei, who was one of his college buddies and has later, it's probably James's best friend now, and helped out with all the video game nerd stuff. And, he played several characters in various episodes. And
he also did and still does a lot of the title artwork.
Yes, did the title artwork. Yeah. So, and oftentimes, if you actually watch how an AVGN episode is made episode of AVGN, James talks about how a lot of the times when he's playing the game, he'll have Mike there to take notes. So it's easier, so he doesn't have to keep pausing the game to take notes for his videos. He has Mike take the notes. that was actually back in the day. It might be a little different now because, as we said before, he has hired writers. He has
right, and I think
now.
right, and I think for a brief period, Mike Batey stepped away for a bit.
But he actually had his own series on the channel where it was like just him playing video games and streaming video games. And then I think he stepped away for a while to do his own thing for a while. I think he's back now.
I know he did the title card for the Guar video that he just did with Mario Paint.
Right.
But I don't know if he's I don't watch them as frequently as I used to, and also James Rolfe doesn't put them up as frequently as used to for the obvious family commitments that we've mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
So I don't know how frequently he contributes.
Yeah.
It may be the occasional one-off, or he may just do everything because the schedule is a lot slower now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that could be. And I know he often does videos with his other staff now. So for a while they were doing James and Mike Mondays where it would be just James and Mike playing video games and just uploading it. It wasn't them playing the nerd character and Mike playing somebody else. It was just literally James Rolfe and Mike Batey, and they were just sitting there playing a video game and just, talking.
Which was always really cool. I always appreciated it because you got to see you got to see more of the person behind the nerd, behind the character, and sometimes that doesn't translate well, or it turns out that the real person is actually kind of a dick. Or just an insufferable human being in general, and it kind of turns you off from the main content a little bit. But not with this, because you ended up seeing that he comes off like a genuine, nice, wholesome guy.
Yeah, well, he is. Obviously the nerd is a character, and I think most people know that the nerd is a character. And actually, if you so we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. I'll go back. I got into AVGN in high school, probably around high school, maybe like right after high school. So like we'll say like 2008-ish, maybe, or 2007, 2008. And I started watching on YouTube because at that point he was on YouTube. He had actually started uploading to YouTube because Mike had convinced him to do that. And in 2008 he was well into the nerd series at that point. He had done a lot. And it wasn't just like a one-off thing. He was doing like 1 to 2 nerd videos a month at least. So it was the primary series, and James would do other things like around Halloween. He'd do Cinemassacre's Monster Madness. He uploaded a lot of his films that he made in college. Because obviously, this is what he went to college for. He's always been, from the time he was a small child, interested in videography. And I believe it was the movie. What was the movie? An American Film, I think it's called.
American movie.
American movie. That was like one of his big influences. To actually get into filmmaking. And there's actually several documentaries on cinemassacre.com, and I'm sure on YouTube, about his upbringing and what influenced him as a kid and all that. They're actually really good films to watch. Like, James Rolfe is a very good filmmaker, and I think that's especially reflected in his older stuff pre AVGN. For example, The Deader to Better, which is a short film that he made in his parents' garage. And I forget, I watched one of the documentaries about it that he did on it, and the amount of work he put in to turn his parents' garage into this graveyard, and it actually looks very convincing, like he's actually in a graveyard. It doesn't look like a garage. And that, I think that really gives credit to him as a filmmaker, that he turned that
You're getting scrambly.
Or
Yeah, you're all scrambly. I can't hear you.
hold on. Internet sucks.
Dull.
All right, are we back?
Kind of.
Hold on.
Technical difficulties, folks. We're probably back in a minute. I think what he was trying to say as a cover very poorly. I think what Rob was trying to say is just it's amazing with showcasing how he was able to transform his parents' garage into a graveyard and also not into a convincing graveyard at that.
Yes.
But on top of that, he's very resource heavy and he takes advantage of the space that he has, and he's very there's a lot of ingenuity and his
Yes.
craftsmanship is
He's very into that
it's
school filmmaking of, having. Am I still scrambly?
not so much.
Okay. Basically old school filmmaking, idea of having practical effects and designs instead of having green screens, actually having sets, and props and backdrop that make it a small space bigger, and using various camera techniques and effects like fog machines and stuff to actually make it look real. So James is very into that like old school way of making films. And
Right, and he cited Ed Wood as a big influence of his too,
Yes.
and he's even done several reviews on Ed Wood and Ed Wood's movies. And Ed Wood was a big proponent of you doing a lot with a very very small budget. So
Yes.
he took this in, and as well as any of the other movies about making movies that he's done.
Mhm.
That he's covered, like American Movie and I forget the one with Steve Buscemi. But anyway, he's all of those other it's called Living in something. Anyway, we'll figure that out. But my point is he does a lot he does everything that he can with all of the resources that he can and the space, and he's
Yeah.
able to really convert it into something really neat.
Yeah, and he was able to bring that into AVGN. So some of the AVGN episodes, it was interesting because the early episodes obviously were just him talking to the camera and playing the game and showing footage from the game, obviously. But then as he got into the series, he became more and more elaborate and started doing more elaborate things. And he would have specials, like Halloween specials, for example, where he did one where he was fighting. He did the Friday the 13th video game and end up fighting Jason Voorhees. And
Right, like he would introduce a story into it, and then after a while, people really liked the specials and how they had a regular plot line, like just a regular through line in plot going through all of them. So it kept you a little bit more engaged, and it was also super wacky and fun, and you got to see more of the character itself of the nerd, where he started creating regular plot lines in the seasons of the show. So all of the episodes would have these little plot devices that would move everything along, and it would be this ridiculous crescendo at the end of the season.
Yeah.
So really, really fun to watch. And I was gonna say that I think he's only used green screen a handful of times.
Yes.
I can't think of many times where he's really used one.
He's spoken about this before. His mentality of CGI is that it should only be used for like absolutely impossible shots. And I think
and I believe that too. We've said that on the show.
Yes. Yeah, and that's the time that he's used green screen has obviously been for shots that he would not have been able to do otherwise. That would have literally been impossible to do in basement. So I that just goes to show that he really sticks to that old school mentality of filmmaking. And making props. And the one episode especially that comes to mind is the Bugs Bunny episodes. When he did Bugs Bunny's birthday surprise or birthday bash, and then Bugs Bunny Crazy Castles.
Birthday
And
blowout,
in that
was it.
birthday blowout, that's it, yeah. So in that, he fights Bugs Bunny, who's actually Mike Batey, obviously dressed up as Bugs Bunny. And then in the first one, he ends up shitting on Bugs Bunny's face, because that's a running gag throughout all of AVGN, is the shit jokes. It's even in the theme song that he'd rather have a buffalo take a diarrhea dump in his ear. It's so he literally
the music, the theme song recorded by Kyle Justin, who also does a lot of the other
Yes.
music in the show.
Yes. Yeah, he was a friend, another friend from college. As is
I mean, pretty much everybody that works on his stuff is all just friends from college or childhood or something.
Much. Yeah. So he there's at one point where he's fighting and he wins the fight, and then he shits on Bugs Bunny's face. And then Bugs Bunny in the second episode ends up beating him and then shits on his face. And he actually made the shit out of I forget, peanut butter and chocolate or something like that. And he did a whole episode on it where he actually, or it was in the commentary for the episode where he actually talked about how he made the props. And it's just, he really goes all out, and
he does. I'm pretty sure he used nuts in there too.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's so ridiculous. The things we do for money.
Oh yeah. Well, I think this wasn't really for money at the time necessarily. I'm sure he was getting paid, but I think the early episodes, you could really tell that it was his passion project. That
yes.
He really loved to do it, and he
but
loved to do other things too.
I mean, in the earlier days of YouTube, he probably was making a lot more than he did on on some of his bigger videos.
Well, I know he was also making money from game trailers and Screw Attack, I believe.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And I think, back then the you could actually, there was money to be made on websites like that. It wasn't like it was today where the algorithm controlled everything, and you're lucky if you get X amount of views. It was a whole different time. It was a way better time in the internet, in my opinion.
Yes, and I mean, even now it's worse with AI because
well,
we won't get into that.
It was pre-Google owning YouTube, which Google buying YouTube was the worst
owning
thing
the
ever.
internet. Yeah, Google basically owning the internet more than it ever did.
Yeah. So, going back to, that old school filmmaking, it really comes out throughout, especially those old episodes and the more production value episode. He did the Batman episode where he was dressed as Batman and Mike Matei was the Joker. He did the Halloween episode where he actually did basically a parody of the original Halloween movie, except instead of him, Laurie Strode getting attacked, it's him, the nerd, is basically the Laurie Strode, the babysitter character, and he's fighting Michael Myers while talking about Halloween on the Atari 2600, which was a pretty awful game. And then he ends up, fighting Michael Myers with the Atari controller. He jams the wireless controllers in Michael Myers' eyes and stuff. It's pretty hilarious. It's a funny episode. And James really he's almost I would say you could call him an American film curator. He has such a vast knowledge of horror movies and monster movies and obscure movies that nobody's ever watched, and a lot of the stuff that he did besides the AVGN, like the Cinemassacre's Monster Madness, was such a great way to learn about this kind of stuff, all these old horror movies. Okay, he would do a whole month of reviews of horror movies.
And he wouldn't just do a review like other people do where they talk about the movie and they say whether or not it was good or bad or whatever their opinion is. He would take the time to talk about the making of the movie, what went into some things, people who were originally supposed to be cast in the role and turned it down.
Yeah.
what production issues they may have had, why things happened. He goes into the history of the movie and the time period sometimes too. So it's really cool to see how vast his knowledge is, and he does a really nice job going above and beyond in the reviews. He's also the only person I've ever known to call a review, which
Yeah.
I think probably should be the real pronunciation because it makes the most sense. And people have criticized him for it to the point where he went and made a video about why he pronounces a review that way and says review, because he has seen something and he is watching it again. So you are reviewing it, kind of like rewind or
Yeah.
anything, except retard, I guess. You can't tard something again. I don't know how that works, but I digress. It makes the way that he explains it, it makes perfect sense as to why we should say review. But people just say review. I guess because review probably stemmed from the vaudevillian term of a Broadway review or a vaudeville review, which
Mhm.
revue. And then when someone, maybe it was originally intended to be pronounced review, and people read it without. Maybe it was originally intended re-view, and it got lost in translation somewhere, and eventually over time it became like a bad game of telephone where review became review, and he has since been the only person to pick up the review torch, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. There was actually a really good episode of, I guess it was a James and Mike Mondays episode, but they always had guests on. And a few years ago they had JonTron on, who was another big famous video game YouTuber. And they gave JonTron a tour of the nerd room, basically. And he's actually that whole, so I don't know, it's still kind of the same, but back then he actually had his basement. Half of it was the nerd room where all the video games and stuff were, and then the other half he converted into an old school video store where he had his whole collection of VHS tapes, laser discs, various like Blockbuster memorabilia that you would see, like, promotional items. And he
That's
actually
so
made
cool.
it look like a video store. And his whole idea, and he even says this, was to preserve, that era of movies where you would go to the video store on a Friday night and you would rent a movie and you would rent a video game and then go home, and that would be your weekend. You
Yeah.
know?
Did we ever do an episode on Blockbuster or video stores in
No,
general?
we should probably do an
Oh,
episode on Blockbuster,
hell
because
yeah.
that'd be
Let's put that on the
that'd be the
calendar.
that'd be the first episode of why does this exist, that where the thing doesn't exist anymore. So maybe that one should be called Why Doesn't This Exist?
Yeah, that might be
Because
good.
there really are no video stores. There's the last Blockbuster or whatever, but I don't even know if that's still open. And I think that was like a parody for a while.
I think it was a real Blockbuster.
It was, but it was
In
like a
in
joke
bit
kind of a thing.
Maybe. I mean, maybe the family that ran it was able to buy the franchise out, and they've just done whatever they do with it. I hope it's still around.
It was
I know someone who
so
recently went to Portland, but it's a little
it's
a
in
little too
Bend,
far from
Oregon.
Bend. No, I
Yeah.
know it's a little too far from Bend, so they weren't able to go there. But they got to see
So
Mount Hood, so there's that.
I think most of it looks like they sell merchandise.
Okay.
And that's where most of their move. They don't. I guess they still can. You could still rent from there, but most of their revenue comes from selling merchandise now.
Yeah, I mean, let's be
What?
honest. For a while, the only thing keeping video stores open was the adult section.
Yeah, pretty much.
Unfortunately, I do remember somebody that I used to work with walked into one of those stores and just asked them, "How could you possibly still be in business?" And the guy pointed to the adult section, and he just said, "Yeah, I get that that's there, but again, how are you still in business? how much of these? How do you can't sell enough? How do you sell enough of these things to cover your rent? Who buys this stuff? And the guy just kind of gave him this look like, I have no idea how or why anybody would still buy, adult DVDs, but he just looked at him, he goes, people buy.
Yeah. For a while, so I didn't really go. We had kind of a local Blockbuster, I think, but we went to West Coast Video. I remember growing
guess
up.
it's
That
the
was our video
shame-
store.
I guess it's the shame factor and maybe that little bit of that, ooh, I might get caught thing.
Yeah. Well,
Maybe-
and also that kind
maybe
of
that's
died
what
when
it
internet
is.
porn became a thing, because you could literally find whatever you want on the internet now.
No, that's what I mean. That's why that's why the guy asked him the question where he said, "We have the internet. Who you can't like? How could you cover your
Well, I guess
rent on these things?" But
People
I guess
who don't
again,
have the internet or don't have like high speed internet, if you have 56K, it's not as good.
this was in like 2015
Yeah, but
In-
people still, a lot of people still had dial up in 2015 even.
in Brooklyn, New York.
Sure, why not? They don't want to pay for
Okay.
internet.
I guess. Well, people buy,
Especially like
As
old
people-
like boomers that don't really give a shit about the internet, and they're stuck in their old school ways.
Well, I guess I could see that.
But anyway,
Just-
so he had turned
That's
his whole
that's a topic for that episode. We will
Yeah.
we'll discuss it in greater detail in the future.
yeah.
And if there's something you want us to discuss in that episode, please let us know in the comments.
So
So there's
the-
your CTA for the day, everybody.
yeah. So he had turned his whole basement into this video store / like retro gaming room. And it he has the wood paneling too, which he purposely put up in that basement to make it look old school. So if you look at all the nerd evidence, that's the nerd room. That's where he does all the videos, is in his basement, and it's called the nerd room, and it's this basically like going to like a trip to another decade. You're going back to the 80s when you walk down those stairs. Which is how he wanted it to be. I would say James Rolfe is definitely he's probably the king of nostalgia, because based on the type of videos he does and the way he collects both movies and video games. He only collects retro games.
A lot of these games I discovered through this, and I wanted to say the same thing about his Cinemassacre reviews also, especially a lot of the Living in Oblivion, I think, was the name of the movie.
Okay.
But I discovered a lot of the movies, and some of the movies we've actually covered on the channel that I that maybe you too discovered them through through his monster his Monster Massacre reviews.
Cinemassacre Monster Madness.
Cinemassacre Monster Madness. That's right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. One for sure was Shadow of the Vampire. I'd never heard of that, and I was super excited. Nosferatu I had heard about, but I hadn't checked it out because at the time I was like, oh, it's just an old movie. But watching him talk about that made me want to watch it. So I watched that, and then Shadow of the Vampire, and I think another one was Blackula, where I just saw that and just said,
Yeah.
whoa, cool. And that's where I started getting, I think that's where I found out about a couple of blaxploitation movies and really started getting into that stuff in my college years. But
yeah,
really cool stuff that he introduced the world to.
Yeah.
Well, the youths, I should say.
The youth.
The
youth of the world.
Yeah, not to be confused with the two youths who went into the sack of suds.
Yeah.
Check out the My Cousin Vinny to understand that. The episode that we did a long time ago, which we actually never talked about the Joe Pesci album that is tied to My Cousin Vinny. But maybe we could do that on another episode where we explore very strange one-off soundtracks or celebrity musicians and
Yep.
their varying musical careers. Anyway,
so the typical nerd episode, he picks a video game off the top. Well, 99% of the time it's a retro game. I think he's done a couple of more modern games in recent times, but most of the games he's doing are either on the NES, the Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis. He's done a couple N64 games, Commodore 64. So it really encompasses the 80s and 90s era of video game, and actually even back to the 70s when he did the Magnavox Odyssey and the Pong console episode, which because they were all released in the 70s. So a typical nerd episode, he picks a retro game, which is and again, the theme song says that he's gonna take you back to the past to play the shitty games that suck ass. But not all the games that he reviews are necessarily shitty. He's done reviews of games that are good but are considered hard or have bullshit like aspects about them, like Zelda 2, for example, on the original Nintendo. So he'll pick a game, and if it's a regular episode, it's just him talking to the camera and then playing the game and commenting over the game. And he'll, it's oftentimes a very vulgar commentary. That's the thing about him is, he goes on vulgar tirades against the shitty games. And another trope is that he's always drinking a Rolling Rock. Like the games basically drive him to drink. So he always has a Rolling Rock beer on hand to take a swig after a particularly annoying part of a game.
Which if you've ever had Rolling Rock, it's okay, but there is always the one, I don't know why, there's always one bottle that's always skunked. So half the fun of Rolling Rock is the Russian roulette style of drinking this beer where you're there with your friends and you're kind of waiting to see which person gets the skunky beer, and it's a good time.
Well, it's funny because
there's always that one person who's just like, "Oh man, this beer sucks," and you're just like, "Yeah."
It's funny because the Rolling Rock has become ubiquitous with the nerd character.
Yes.
It's one of his trademarks.
I had also never heard of that brand of beer until I watched those, and then that's the only thing that compelled me to try them.
Well, I was going to say,
if I hadn't seen him drinking it and it hadn't become a thing associated with the nerd, I think I would have glanced at it and went and got the other thing, and I probably wouldn't have even read the label.
Well, funnily enough, the fact that the nerd drinks Rolling Rock was a complete accident. When he initially was making that episode, that was just the only beer that he had in his fridge at the time, and he wanted to do the gag where the nerd's drinking a beer because it's it's such a shitty game that it's basically driving him to drink. And Rolling Rock was the only beer that was in the fridge, and that's what he grabbed, and it just became ubiquitous with the nerd character that he drinks Rolling Rock.
Huh, cool.
Yeah.
So I guess the following Rolling Rock that he drank, he probably just wanted to keep consistency.
Yeah.
So he just bought Rolling Rocks just to have.
Yeah, he probably just said like, "Oh, well, I guess the nerd character drinks Rolling Rock because this is what I have."
Yeah. That's a cool little nugget.
Yeah. So,
sorry, I didn't realize you were still talking about the episode. I thought we had moved on. Continue.
I was just gonna say, so the episode, goes through with him trashing the game. Usually he'll point out the severe flaws in the game. Sometimes he'll do a series, or he'll do a game that has multiple releases on multiple consoles. And sometimes, these episodes can get pretty big. Like he'll do the Ghostbusters, where he had to do 2 episodes because there was too many Ghostbusters games to fit into one episode, and he usually tries to keep the episodes between 10 and 15 minutes. So that was that's why he broke it up. And he's done series like that, or he's done like Castlevania, for example. He did a 4-part series for Castlevania. For Intellivision and ColecoVision, he kind of did like a double episode called Double Vision, or he did one episode on Intellivision, another on ColecoVision, the consoles. And he's not only doing video games, he does hardware also. He'll do peripherals, like the stuff that all these third-party controllers and things that they tried to make it so to get kids to like it, like the Rollin' Rocker, which was a controller that allowed you to like stand on it and like rock back and forth to use, and it was a horrible piece of shit. And that was on the original Nintendo.
Huh.
But so stuff like that. And then, like we said, he has the more elaborate episodes, like the Bugs Bunny episode where he actually fights Bugs Bunny. He has the Batman episode where Mike Matei is the Joker and is forcing him to play all these shitty Batman games as a a punishment. He has him tied up as Batman. And then you have the Wizard of Oz episode where Mike Matei plays the Cowardly Lion. That was a pretty funny one. Sometimes it's just as simple as like the guest character being on the couch, and sometimes there's like way more elaborate, like they actually fight or something. There was an episode where he actually had Kyle Justin. Well, there's several episodes that feature Kyle Justin, but one in particular was the Battletoads episode where and the transition is amazing because he's playing the theme song. He finishes the theme song, and the running gag is that he lives behind the nerd's couch, and all of a sudden he just steps out and sits on the couch, and the nerd's like, "Who the fuck are you?" He's like, and it was a whole gag because they find out that Battletoads is actually a co-op game. If you press start on the second controller, you can play as the second character, but it's like it's really hard to play co-op because there's team damage, so you can beat up your friend and kill them by accident. So that it ends up being more of a detriment than a help to play 2-player in Battletoads.
Interesting.
And then there's the episode where he's actually the rematch.
I think that's also Bunny. I think that episode is where I first heard of Battletoads too, and then a lot of these games. Well, you could still get a lot of the retro games cheap around the time where he started putting them cheaper than they are now. Then when he started working on them and he started doing episodes on them, because
there's still cheap retro games. It just depends on the rarity and
some of them. Some of them. I would say most retro games are still pretty affordable, depending on.
If you wanted like a Super Mario Brothers Duck Hunt cart, that's like pennies because they're so numerous, and they were bundled with the original Nintendo console, so they're all over the place.
I mean, some of them are they're just there for popularity but there are still a bunch of them out there, like a lot of the older Pokemon games.
Yes.
They're just popular, and that's why they've pretty much held their value. But there's I'm sure Nintendo printed the shit out of those.
There's also emulators now where you can pretty much play whatever you want at any time on a PC. But James has specifically stated
there's emulators that you could get on your phones now. I recently got one specifically to play Pokemon Emerald. I haven't started it yet, but it's nice to know that it's there.
James has actually specifically stated, though, that he doesn't use emulators when he films a nerd episode. Like he wants to play it on as it was intended on the original console. So whenever he's filming a nerd episode, he's actually playing on a console and a game in his collection.
Yes, and that adds to the authenticity too, which helps the material.
And often he said, I don't know how it is now, but in the earlier days, it was actually quite difficult to record sometimes because, he had to have an elaborate setup with all of his consoles and his TV. And he uses purposely an old CRT TV, because it fits in with the nostalgia factor of you're playing on an old tube TV, but also
I miss my Sony Trinitron.
Yeah. But also the, retro consoles especially work better when you're playing, because on modern TVs there's actually a delay because of the way the TV is. So it could actually like be a noticeable delay when you're playing a video game where you're hitting a button and it takes like half a second for the character to do something. But it's quite a complicated setup that he has to record the videos. And I think originally what he was doing is he's using a DVD recorder that was hooked to his TV. And I guess he had the console plugged in through the DVD recorder and then the DVD recorder through the TV. So it was recording whatever the console was playing onto a DVD, and then he would put that into his computer and rip it from the DVD to use for his video and edit.
Oh my gosh, that's
Yeah, it's
crazy.
very, very complicated. I'm sure he has a more modern setup now where he's just doing it digitally. But and for episode like the Virtual Boy, there was no way for him to plug it in, so he actually had to film the screen, and he said it was really difficult. And he was like, "I apologize for the shitty quality, but I had to actually put the camera up to the viewfinder to actually record because there was no way for me to plug this in to record the gameplay." So
I do appreciate that he gives people the heads up too.
yes,
Like, he's very courteous.
He's
Someone is trying to sell a Rolling Rock signed by the Angry Video Game Nerd for $100 on eBay, by the way. And the delivery fee is $20. So you're looking at $120 for a Rolling Rock that has been signed by him. It looks like it was. Yeah, it's an open bottle too, so you can't even drink it.
yeah.
All right, I guess that's a thing. I'd probably just keep it. Anyway, for some reason Rolling Rock has never sponsored the AVGN or done a collaboration with him.
Yeah,
Maybe
I'm surprised.
Maybe it's the Bugs Bunny shitting thing, or
Maybe it's too vulgar.
Maybe he's never reached out, or they never bothered to reach out to him. I don't know. I'd like to ask him about that if I ever met the nerd and just say because I would be surprised if they didn't try.
He does go to cons a lot, and he meets fans often.
Yeah,
so
I wouldn't be.
You could probably find him somewhere.
I probably could, just as long as Guar didn't kill him for real. Because that's the most recent episode, so that could be the last one.
Yeah.
If he ever wanted to really end it, that would probably be the funniest way to do it. Is to just end it abruptly with Guar killing him on stage and not tell anybody that was the last episode.
Yeah.
Or just go dark for a while, and then they could just do they could do an episode where he's in hell and he has to play shitty video games in hell throughout the season in order to get back to the land of the living. That would be kind of cool if they did that. But who knows? Maybe he'll listen to this episode and do it. I don't know. Would be nice.
Mm-hmm.
We would just appreciate the credit for that and the link in the subs. We don't need money. We just need the following, because the money will come. It always comes. And comes again.
So, for many years, James teased doing an ET review, because ET for the Atari 2600 is often considered the worst game ever made by many people.
I think it gets a bad rap. I think it sucks, but I don't think it's the worst game ever.
I think I've played worse games. He actually goes into that. So let me get to the. So he teased it for many years because people have said, "Oh, when are you doing ET?" Because that was like the obvious one. Because it is often, and there's a whole story about how the ET for the Atari 2600 is oftentimes blamed for the great video game crash that happened in the early 80s. The ET release of ET and its failure was one of the main catalysts for the video game crash. And the story goes as they took all the extra ET cartridges and they buried them in this landfill in the desert in New Mexico.
There was a whole documentary about
finding.
I think it's called Finding ET.
Yeah,
and they interviewed all of the devs and the team, and they get into the story as to why the game is so is so negatively revered.
Yeah,
and it's not their fault.
No, it's not. They were basically forced by the publisher to put it out as fast as possible to get it out in time for the Christmas release of ET on video, if I remember correctly.
And they weren't allowed to watch the movie. They were just given cliff notes about and a picture of what ET looks like.
Yes.
They had no idea what it was supposed to be. So they bought copies. So they bought the game and they pretty much returned it immediately because they saw the movie, they bought the game thinking that they would be able to play the movie because that's what it was. That's how it was marketed. And they came back saying, "What the hell is this piece of shit? This has nothing to do with the movie." And it killed everything, including the careers of all of the Atari devs, which needed to make this game in 4 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Just to get the deadline there with no information. It would have been nice if they got if they were able to screen a copy of this movie just to get an idea, or if they could just give them a couple of scenes here and there to just show them the basic plot line. But they got nothing.
Yeah.
And they had to make stuff. They didn't even, all they knew really was just, this is what ET looks like. He's an alien. And he's trying to go to his home planet, and that's it. So it sucks because those guys they didn't deserve to have they didn't deserve to take the heat for all of this. It wasn't their fault. If anything, whoever the publisher should be the one should have been the one that got all the heat, but it's an unfortunate circumstance.
It was a different time where people didn't know that, it was,
of course,
there was no internet, so that's what they saw is what they got,
Right. The only way if you looked at the cover, the only way to tell is to really just talk to the devs, and only a handful of people really did that. And maybe they didn't. Maybe if they had done interviews, they were afraid of retaliation from the publisher, so maybe they didn't say much, or maybe they just declined to do interviews at the time. It depends. There's a lot of really, there's a lot of extenuating circumstances, but it's unfortunate.
Yeah.
But I guess that takes us to the movie. No,
well, that's what I was gonna say. So, he in an episode that he did about Spielberg games, he teased doing the ET game and announced at that point that there was going to be an AVGN movie. And so he started making the movie, and apparently the movie was very, very time consuming. It was caught in development hell for a little bit. And I know it was really rough on James. He had spoken about this because he had to live in LA to film the movie. So he actually moved to LA for like a year, I think. A year or two to film the movie. And I believe at this time that the regular AVGNs were on hold.
It was. Was it around the time where he became a dad, or was that a little bit after?
Yes. Yeah, it was right around the time that he became a new dad too. So it was a rough time for him. But they finally
I'm
released.
Sure. Also, LA fucking sucks.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's where you have to go to film movies.
Well, not so much anymore, but yes. At the time, you kind of did.
He finally did the movie and reviewed E.T. the Extraterrestrial for 2600, and he even says in it, compared to some of the other games that he's reviewed, this is actually not that bad. Like it's not good, but there are way worse games than this. So he's like actually confused as why it's called the worst game ever, because it's really not. Interestingly enough, the movie
I think just the tail of the backlash is what's caused everything to get that name and to start, and because the whole crash followed after, but it's not the game itself.
It got a bad rap. ET was the Ed Wood of video games almost. The Plan 9 from Outer Space, where it really just got a horrible rap, and it is considered the worst thing ever, even though there are worse movies than Plan 9 from Outer Space. Like Birdemic, for example, that's a horrible movie.
Or Troll 2, or Thanksgiving.
The Room.
Thanksgiving 3, which might be the worst movie I've ever seen.
Thanksgiving 3 was horrible.
It was hard to watch that.
Yeah.
We've done the review on it if you would like to check that out. Or the
Yes.
review, as some would say.
So, he comes out with the movie and it actually coincided with the 31st anniversary of the 1983 video game Crash. So there you go.
Cool.
But since then he's
he
continued
also
to do
well
nerd episodes.
he also crowdfunded this, and this was also
Yes.
another interesting time where I guess we could talk about that at some point and do a whole episode on the Kickstarter Indiegogo era. I know those sites are still used and people still do the crowdfunding things, but it was a big deal trend, and almost every passion project was funded that way through either Kickstarter or Indiegogo, and it was a really cool thing, and you would get a bunch of really neat trinkets
Yes.
depending on what you did. I gave him like maybe 20. I think I just did the minimum $20, and I think the name appears as a credit or something like that. But you could get the sky's the limit really with what people want to give and what their reward would be. Kind of like our Patreon, which you can go right ahead and click the link in the description and donate money to, and then we will reward you with stuff. Beautiful, beautiful stuff. Anyway,
so
we'll talk about crowdfunding at an episode down the road, probably, if we don't forget.
So AVGN's continued to make episodes. In more recent years, he's actually gotten more and more famous people on the show. I think the first one where he had like an actual like famous person was when he did the Toxic Avenger episode, and he actually had Lloyd Kaufman on the couch with him. That was such a great episode.
That's one of my favorites, if not my favorite.
Yep. Since then, he's had Macaulay Culkin. Obviously, more recently has had Guar. So he's gotten to the point now where he's actually having like more and more famous people on the show.
Yeah.
So I guess we could talk about the controversy a little bit. So a few years ago, there was a big controversy, and there's a whole subreddit dedicated to this, which I think is just ridiculous. And it just shows that Redditors are literally the worst people, the worst human beings on the planet Earth.
They are.
I will proudly say that. And as someone who I occasionally use Reddit because it's good to see I'm interested in this. There's a whole forum dedicated to it. Let me check it out. The people that are post on Reddit are like some of the worst people on planet Earth. So they came up with this whole Cinemassacre truth subreddit where all they do is bitch about James and criticize him. And, anybody that defends him in any way is a fanboy. It's just a whole bunch of bullshit. But I guess it really stems from the fact
that they are still watching the content. They're hate watching everything. So it makes no sense, because if you really hate this thing that much,
and they're all probably fat nerds in their mother's basement that haven't ever contributed anything to society anyway. So it's like all they can do is try to bring other people down by bitching.
No, I'm sure all the Millhouses in the world.
So, basically, the whole controversy, quote unquote, stemmed from the fact that James, in probably the late 2010s, early 2020s, around there, hired staff to help him do the AVGN videos. And they're I want to preface with say that there have been times where he's taken hiatus from AVGN because he's wanted to do other things, or had family obligations and couldn't do 2 videos a month.
Yeah, he's allowed.
And there was an entire fan backlash over that. So in order to alleviate that, so he could still have a life with his family, his wife and his 2 children.
Yeah, he's allowed to exist.
Exactly, and do other things in life. He hired staff to help him write the videos. Now, if you watch the more recent AVGN videos, are they as good as the originals? No, I will openly admit that. I don't think the writing is as good, but they're not terrible. They're not bad. It's just it's just more generic now. It's not as doesn't have the same magic as it originally did when he was doing it himself, which is fine.
Yeah.
Again, the guy is trying to just live his life and be a dad, you know.
All right,
So
he gets to still do this 20 years later, which I'm sure he never thought that he would do
exactly
or be able to do.
the fact that it's even a controversy is complete bullshit, and it just goes to show that people on the internet really have to get a fucking life.
Yes, if they find something to complain about, if somebody does anything, the internet will complain about it, whether or not it makes any sense. If he farts, there's going to be a whole like all of the people on that forum are going to have a field day with it and talk about how like terrible he is for farting.
Well, also his first daughter had some complications and had some medical issues, so it was like, you know, he's trying to like take care of his kid, and you know, now he has another kid, and it's just like you forget the way they treat people like that. It's just horrible.
It makes no sense. I mean,
No,
these people are probably never going to have children, and God help them if they do. But it's just so stupid.
yeah,
People in general are very fickle. There's a lot of very nice people out there, but there's also a fuck ton of assholes.
they're yes, absolutely.
This is why I'm not really sure why we need 9 to 10 billion. I think Thanos was right.
Yeah,
Actually, I don't think he went far enough. Hot take. Thanos should have gone for 3/4. Maybe 4/5. Actually, 9/10. 9/10 is a good number. One in 10 survive. I think that's good.
yep.
He hit I have yet to see the AVGN movie, unfortunately, but we can do that as a separate episode and watch it, and I think that'll
Yeah.
be really fun.
Yeah.
So
I think I watched it when it came out.
Let's put a pin in that to do an episode on that. I think it'll be a lot of fun. How was it?
It was a long time ago, so I
Okay.
barely remember it.
Do you
I think it
remember
was
if you
good.
liked it? Okay.
Yeah, no, I liked it. I think it was good.
Okay, cool. I bet it has a lot of really fun cameos. I guess
Yeah.
the first collaboration thing that reminds me, this reminds me, was the other big pre-ish YouTube guy who had his own site where it was just a bunch of different review content was the Nostalgia Critic, who he was pretty damn big for a while, and then
Yes.
he got canceled.
Yeah. Well,
So-
Nostalgia Critic actually had some controversy. Not him directly, but there were allegations against one of the people on his website, which was Planet Awesome, I believe.
Channel. It was
Channel Awesome. Channel
I think
Awesome.
it was Channel Awesome, and it may have become Planet Awesome later. I'm
Yeah,
not sure.
it was Channel Awesome. I got it wrong. But there was someone on his website that was accused of sexual assault, and I guess like him as management, like didn't do anything about it. And they kind of tried to sweep it under the rug from what I remember. And yeah. So, and I think that guy ended up killing himself. Like the guy who committed the assault ended up killing himself. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Because it was
do it.
like, you know, he was like, it was true. He was like, he actually had like sexually assaulted somebody, and you know, the walls were closing in, I guess you could say.
Oh, that's rough.
Yeah,
Well,
but there was a big controversy with that because apparently they didn't do anything to address the issues, and the issues were brought up to him as management of that website that this person was not a good person.
yeah, that's just dumb.
Yeah, and I think, you know, he still does Nostalgia Critic. Obviously he's lost a lot of popularity since that whole controversy. I don't think it's
I didn't
nearly
know
as
that
big as it used to be.
I didn't know that he even still did anything.
Yeah.
And this is how many years later. I thought that he was done.
No, I think
But
he's not
that
done, but he's very not like it used to be, basically.
yeah, that's you. You have to address it.
Yeah.
It's just it's it's just terrible ethics if you don't do anything about it, and it's just a bad move to not. It's just a bad move to not get rid of this guy, or to not at least investigate him, or at least not address it. It's
Yeah.
insane.
Yeah.
It's insane, and I mean the poor. I assume it was a lady who he assaulted. This person.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. This.
I believe it was on one of the other creators on channel.
Oh my god, that's worse.
Yeah.
I mean, it's bad no matter what, but that's like, holy shit, man! What are you doing? You got to stop that shit.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're not going to go into detail on that stuff, but what I was getting to was the first big collaboration that he did um was with the guy Doug who ran Ron's channel,
Yeah,
also the
the
guy with the
Nostalgia Critic.
glasses, the Nostalgia Critic, and they battled in this place that you and I know in good old New Jersey.
Yeah.
Digital Press, which I don't know if that's still a store, but
I don't know either. Actually, I wanted to go check them out recently, but I don't know if they were able to survive COVID. Let's take a look.
You know what? I feel like they probably did really well because retro games shot up.
Yeah, that's true. People started collecting more during COVID.
Yeah, I mean,
especially because a lot of people had fucking disposable income, free income from the government at that time.
I mean, I made money on like selling all of my N64, selling my N64 collection and my GameCube. I made way more money than I would have in any other era.
Press.com, which is a website, but it doesn't look like Clifton, New Jersey.
No,
it is
looks
closed,
like it's
but
open.
it's still it's closed now, obviously, because it's late at night. But it is still a thing, apparently.
Yeah, DP Video Games. That's funny.
Yeah, really cool store. And yeah, they've hosted meet and greets with AVGN before several times, I think. So yeah,
cool. They good for them. They still do a bunch of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been there a couple of times. It's a cool store. It's very much reminds me of like what GameStop used to be back in the 90s, where it was actually like a cool place to go and you could buy retro games, and they had a bunch of used games, and they didn't try to fucking swindle you out of your money.
Yeah. That was nice.
Yeah.
But yeah, down at Digital Press Video Games, down at 378 Piaget Avenue, Route 46 East, Clifton, New Jersey, 07011. Yeah. You get there Monday through Thursday, 11 to 8, Friday through Saturday, 11 to 9, and Sunday, 12 to 5. Sunday at Digital Press. I don't
know if we mentioned.
I just wanted to do a nice plug for them. They don't. They didn't sponsor they didn't sponsor the show. Although maybe it would be good if they did.
I don't know if we mentioned also that they James Rolfe is from New Jersey, so
yes, yes, he is.
He lived in Philly briefly when he was in college, but has always lived in the New Jersey, like Camden, Philly area. So he's from South Jersey. Actually, I was reading he was actually
I think I first found out about Weird New Jersey from him because I think he did an episode on it, on like Cinemassacre or something.
He was in a movie, which now I want to watch this movie called Shooting Clerks, which is a biographical dramedy about the filming of Clerks. And I may
have seen this.
It stars many of the people that were in Clerks, including Kevin Smith, but James Rolfe and Mike Matei are also both in the movie.
Huh. I think I have seen this, actually.
So
it sounds very familiar.
I have not seen this, and I actually was very interested in watching this now, because it's like combining two of my favorite New Jersey pop culture icons, James Rolfe and Kevin Smith.
Yeah. He has also recently joined a band, James Rolfe, which very
Yes.
cool. He put out their music video recently on his channels, and I think they launched their own YouTube channel where they're just gonna shoot their performances and stuff.
James,
So,
yeah, that's
very
another
cool.
thing is that James is very much into old school metal.
Yeah.
And actually, I think I learned about the band Wishfinder General from an AVGN episode.
Nice.
So,
Yeah, I've heard some fun things about them. I heard people have told me over the years that they used to go to Witchfinder General with Peter Steele from Typo Negative, and they used to wear the spike helmets. So it's it's a cool little nugget of info there. But the the other thing that I wanted to get to is that there's also the other outside of the Monster Madness and the nerd itself, there's been other spin-off things that he's
yes.
done, and one of those that I really liked was what's bullshit, where he would just talk about
Oh
some
yeah, the
some
bullshit
pop
man.
culture, yeah, some pop culture thing where it was just ridiculous, or there was something really stupid about it that just bothered him. Like he did one about vampires, and I didn't know about all of the different rules around the vampires.
Oh yeah, like how
Where
they have to be invited into a place, otherwise they can't enter.
Yeah, so it was just all these like small comedy bits just about him just going on these mini tirades about how stupid whatever this thing is. Or there was another one where we talked about DVD cartridges and how some of them are normal and you could just open it up and it's fine. And then there's others where they have the little snaps on them, and you don't know that they're so small that you don't even realize that they're there. So you almost break apart the case when you're trying to just open it just to get to the DVD. And how the packaging is just how there's no gold, how there's no standard for DVD cartridges, and just why isn't there just one kind of cartridge? So
Yeah.
it's hit or miss about what he's talking about, but then eventually he turned that into a character too, where it was a living pile of bullshit.
Yeah. One of my favorite non-AVGN James Rolfe characters is Board James.
Yes, that is the next thing that I was going to get into, so I'm glad you
He-
said that.
Yeah, so he started it as kind of a fun little thing where him and Mike Matei play like these old school board games, and he reviews it. And Board James is the character. It's almost like how the nerd is its own character. Board James is his own character. But he later turned it into this horror series, which actually has this overarching plot, and it's actually really good. It's like this psychological horror series over the last few episodes, and I don't know if you've ever watched the commentary episode where he did like the whole commentary of the board or he like did like a whole like documentary style kind of like talking about the filming of Board James and the story. But he actually intended it to be that from the beginning, and there's little Easter eggs and hints throughout every episode of Board James of like the ending.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
It's really cool.
I know. I definitely watched this a long time ago, but it was just. I don't remember it now, well, I remember it now that you're saying it, but I don't remember what. It's been a while. Let's put it
Yeah.
that way.
Yeah.
But yes, I have. I found out a lot about a lot of different board games through this too, and a few of them have been on my list of ones to acquire, and some of them are pretty expensive. Like the one that I've wanted to try forever has been Tornado Rex.
Yeah.
Which which I think a copy of that in bad condition goes for, the last time I checked, I think went for about $75, and I think a mint condition went for like one for about 200.
Yeah.
It's probably gone up since then.
I'm sure.
But another one that I really wanted to play was Fireball Island, and that too was expensive at the time. And then I think Goliath Games bought the rights to it, and then they re-released it, and they put it out to the world, and it's I think $25 to $30. which I did get, and I played a couple of times, and it was fun. But the problem is that Goliath built they built this like shit. Like you could clearly tell that they barely put any effort into releasing the board. They could have made a really nice big 3D interactive board where you just pop I mean, it wouldn't even have taken that much effort to just make a sturdy mold of plastic and just slap it onto this thing. Instead, they did it with the flimsiest plastic that you could. It was so hollow, and honestly, if you held a lighter to it, if you held a lighter within inches of it, it looked like it would just melt away completely. So the quality of the product that they put out outside of the marbles and the tiki demon god volcano statue thing, outside of that, they did the bare minimum for it, and it's kind of a crappy and they ended up making a crappier quality product where they could have done a really great thing to revive the nostalgia, and they could have made a legitimately very good board game and sold it for maybe even 30, 35 if they really wanted to. But for $25, it's not worth it because of the poor quality of the construction.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that part's a shame. But the game itself, that being said, the game itself is fun. But because the quality of the board was so poor, I never wanted to play it again.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was honest. Part of it was because I was so afraid that it would break that I ended up just donating it because it was just taking up space.
Yeah.
But if they ever put out a better quality version of that game, I'd be happy to pick it up.